Okay, I'm going to start this recording right now so that I don't possibly forget. And let's see. Okay, good. Let's go to gallery view. And I think we got two more. And wait. No, okay. Good, good. And good. Oh yes, I've got that. I have mixed Scott showed a book entitled Atlas of Interpersonal Situations. It's too realistic. That is, it's about real interpersonal situations, many of which are quite boring. But I don't know, I did get a little value out of it just going through the whole thing, and every now and then I'd say, no, there might be something to this particular situation. So I suppose I can recommend that book as an inspiration, but not a resource. No, not a foundation for building anything. Really more a set of ideas for building something. So, well, we have a goodly percentage of our participants here, so we might as well get moving. The task for this week was to look at the encounter editor and decide what to do with it. The basic questions I'll be asking are, one, is this thing of any value or merit? I mean, should we just throw this thing away? So forget it, there's nothing here. Two, we could say that yes, it has merit, but it needs a lot of changes. Or three, it's pretty damn good, and the primary thing to focus on is to make it, to break it loose from C-boot. So maybe a few minor improvements on user interface, etc. So let's hear some opinions or questions or whatever on the encounter editor.
I got a small, I just got a small, as an opinion, I found that it's a very useful tool. Indeed, it's a very useful tool. Well, trying to do the testing for some encounters, it's just a small problem that I might say. When you click on the test, and then you get the pop-up window with for selecting both the protagonist and the antagonist. If you change one of the options, you have to click on the test again, and then click again on the protagonist and the antagonist to see which would be the desired reaction.
Oh, okay. So user interface problem there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Barry, I was too intimidated to try it. Yes, it is kind of complicated, but if you think this is complicated, storytelling is complicated, and there's simply no way. This is the absolute minimum that I could boil everything down to, and I just cannot imagine taking it any smaller or making it any simpler. So so I think the proper conclusion to draw from this is my discussions of the SWOT technology, the full interactive storytelling technology, was just a total waste of time. There was just no point in going into all of that detail because that's just too complicated. I should have stuck with the encounter editor, or I should have started with that and stuck with it. So yes, it is intimidating. However, I think it is manageable. I think it is learnable in a reasonable amount of time. Max, I think it looks like a very good tool, but I couldn't figure out how to really use it. Maybe you could share your screen and make a tour of the software and show us how it works. Good idea. Maybe I should do that. Let's see. I was only able to spend an hour with it, and I'm still not completely how to start a new project from scratch. Okay, well, let's see. Let me figure out. I'm going to have to do a little. Unfortunately, sharing the screen might prove a little okay, I've never shared screen. There's something called Start Share. That looks like the right thing. Does anybody know, has anybody shared this screen before?
There's a button below green says share screen on my screen.
I don't have it here. No.
Oh, I can't.
No. Needing encryption. I do have a menu item. I will, let me see if I can, okay, if I throw you all off and, you know, your computer catches fire or whatever, don't blame me. I'm just trying out the only option I can see. If this does crash us, then I'll just restart and send a new invitation. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom. And whiteboard, iPhone, iPad, music, unknown. Well, there is a desktop one, so I'll do that. Allow Zoom to share your screen. I have to grant access to it. And let's see, yes, I'm going to grant access to Zoom. Zoom US will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit. Well, oh. Wait, something just happened. It does seem to, let me try that. And now I'm going to come over here and ask again to share the screen, desktop. Let's see what happens. Share. You are screen sharing. Does anybody see anything?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Well
Blue
then,
screen.
let's see if I can bring up, I'll bring up the current, or the encounter editor I'm using for the Arthurian story world. And for some weird reason, that Java thing screws up, but I will, there we go. Okay, that's centered now. Can you see that, or is that squeezed down too small for you to read anything? I have this huge screen. Wait a minute, I have an idea. I can go.
I'm on my phone and I'm able to pinch and zoom in, so it's okay.
I can possibly change my screen size so I'm not so huge. Displays, here we go.
I think it's kind of perfect now, actually.
Oh, it's okay for you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least for me.
Okay.
It's good for me. I can see it also.
Okay. Well then, let's proceed here. Let me pick a good one. Oh yeah, Turch Truas. Yes. Okay, so here's the basic thing. I've got all of these. These are all encounters for the Arthurian story world. You can see I've got a lot of them. And if I want to add a new one, I can just come over here. Let's just make up a new encounter here. So I click on the plus sign, and we need a name for an encounter, and we will call it junk test encounter. Okay, so now, what the hell is that? Oh, is somebody drawing on the screen? Is that what? Huh, strange.
Sorry about that. I didn't know
No,
it was really going to
I'm
let me.
yeah, it let you do it. That's interesting. Okay, so we have junk test encounter. And so now we type in some text for it. Once upon a time, there was a class about the encounter editor. Chris decided that Chris was in a big hurry that day. And so we type in lots more junk about Chris and the cat on his lap and all of that other stuff. And then we come down here and we say, well, here's some options. I am Chris, presumably. So in fact, I will change this to say you are in a big hurry that day. So you're the protagonist. So this is talking to you, whereas this is what you are going to do about it. So I decide to quit, to end the class early. I do my duty and continue the class. I let the cat run the class. Okay, so those are some options I've got. Now, here's some other things I can do. First, this center date is not really important. It's something I threw in to organize the time sequencing of the encounters. That way you can just say, this one happens early and this one will happen late. So you can just put a number in, or, you know. Let's see, target, that's really the antagonist. In this case, I can specify, basically the various characters in the story world can be chosen. So the target of this, the antagonist for me, is Gawain. Okay, now prerequisites. A prerequisite is a story world, or I'm sorry, is an encounter that must take place before this encounter can happen. In other words, suppose that I had suppose that I refer to my new calculator. Well, I'll need to explain where the calculator came from, so I will need another encounter, which I'll create, called getting a new calculator. And bingo, I get a new calculator. So now I can go to the junk test encounter and say, whoops, this is a bug. Notice how it threw away my text? I need to fix that. If you don't save after typing in text, see, I better save it now. Well, no, I don't want to save anything. I don't want to ruin my good thing. Now I can say that I click on this and add it as a I'm sorry. Go down here and there. I selected getting a new calculator as a prerequisite for getting a new calculator, you fool. Let me delete that. Hey, come on, delete, bingo. Getting a new calculator is a prerequisite for junk test encounter. So, just a sec. Nope, I'm gonna sneeze any second now. So for this one, I add the prerequisite getting a new calculator. So now I've set up junk test encounter so that it can't take place until after this prerequisite has taken place. Does that make sense? Is that understandable, everyone? Okay. Now I can also have disqualifiers. For example, let me come over here and have a disqualifier, namely cat eats calculator. And now I can say that for junk test encounter, cat eats calculator is a disqualifier. Oops, I blew it again. I got the, for junk test encounter, cat eats calculator is a disqualifier. So first I have to have gotten a new calculator, but also it can't be the case that the cat ate the calculator. That would, if that happens, then I can't have the junk test encounter. So that's the that's what prerequisites and disqualifiers are, and you can have a bunch of them. My experience has been that putting in too much of this can be, oh dear, rather confusing. So you don't want to have too much of this. This is primarily for dealing with logical weirdos. You know, if you kill off a character, then you better use that as a disqualifier for any encounter that refers to that character. Now, okay, so this is the easy stuff. Basically, you create an encounter, you type in the text, I'm going to go ahead and save it. I can fix it later. And this one, okay. By the way, this is stupid, the way I set up this menu. Really, saving should be up here, whatever. Let's see. So, but with junk test encounter, I had these options. Before I proceed to the next step, let's just take an opportunity for everybody, everything I've discussed now on the table, any questions about it? By the way, I can't see the chat text here, so you'll have to raise them orally.
You've changed the interface a little bit from the C-boot one that you.
Yeah, this is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
It is in general improved,
Mm-hmm.
but in fact, I can't even remember what
Like,
the C-boot one looked like.
You've taken out, like, below prerequisite and disqualifiers, you've taken out exclude as protagonist, exclude as antagonist, and then there were checkboxes.
Yes, yes, the exclusionary. I decided that you see, if this is going to be a story world in which I abandoned my earlier specification with the Storytron technology that the player could play as any character. For this version of the encounter editor, the player is the protagonist is fixed. I just decided it was too complicated to try to make this applicable to any set of characters. What do you guys think of that decision? Do you think I should retain the ability for the player to play as any character, or should it be that we specify for this story world, the player is this character? Thoughts, comments?
It's probably simpler if it's just one person. If it's just one person being the protagonist all the time, it's definitely a simpler way to do it.
Yes, it is easier in design terms because you don't have to think about all sorts of weird combinations.
I think it's better because if you want every character to be played, possibly, then you have to create a very specific story for that.
Yep.
And I think most of the stories are more interesting if you have a setup character like to play. I think.
Yep. So, okay. So that cleared up some screen space. As always, we got to sweat screen real estate. And it also made it even simpler. So,
Barry had a question, but his microphone cut out and he wanted me to read it directly from the chat.
oh,
So
okay.
since you can't get to it, he says, I'm curious, I remember you mentioning that something called clusters, predetermined encounters, were problematic to your story design. How does this differ from that?
Wait, repeat the question.
Hang on, let me get back in the chat here. Barry says, I'm curious. I remember you mentioning that something called clusters, predetermined encounters, were problematic to your story design. How does this differ from that?
Yeah, I'm confused over that because for the most part, previously I had used the term clusters to apply to special groups of verbs that took place together. They were a cluster of verbs that were all closely related. So now what confused me is I don't understand the application of the concept of clusters to encounters. I'm trying to guess what.
Barry just chatted again and indicated that he think he might have misunderstood the question. So go ahead and carry on.
Okay, okay. I'm trying to get see, I can't see everybody. What does show grid video, show thumbnail video, show active speaker video? Okay, we are on thumbnail. What does grid do? Well,
I have a question too.
okay, go ahead.
Do you always need, for a specific encounter, do you always need an antagonist?
No, and in fact, for Le Mot d'Arthur, there are no antagonists. It turns out that I threw that away for Le Mot d'Arthur. However, that is unique to Le Mot d'Arthur. An encounter is meant to be an encounter between the protagonist and a particular character. And so typically an encounter, for example, in this case, the target or the antagonist is Gawain. And so it would be written along the lines of, so you're walking down the street one day and you bump into Gawain. And Gawain says, you're a dirty, stinking rat. And you get mad at Gawain, what do you do?
Okay,
These
because
are meant to be, go ahead.
I thought antagonist was supposed to be someone with like a kind of like a villain, you know, like.
No,
Okay. So that makes sense actually.
In dramatic theory, antagonist is really just the other guy. When you have a story, the protagonist is the main character, the one that the audience is expected to identify with. And then the antagonist in the story as a whole is the person who is in some way preventing the protagonist from meeting his own goal. However, when we boil it down to just a single encounter, this is a tiny little story. The antagonist is whomever we are interacting with in that one little story. The antagonist could actually be a good guy. You know, it could be your girlfriend. You know, you're walking down the street and you run into your girlfriend. Oh, hi, girlfriend. How are you doing today? We haven't seen each other in 3 days. What have you been up to? Blah, blah, blah. She is still technically the antagonist of that particular encounter. So really, it's just the way the drama works. You know, I could say the other guy.
Okay. I think in French it has a different definition actually, but I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, maybe. Well, in fact, the Greek root of it, ant and agon, ant or anti, that's actually Latin, is against or opposed. And agon is Greek for struggle. And so this is the person you're struggling against. But even then, if you imagine an encounter with a girlfriend, if it's going to be dramatically interesting, it will be about a problem you're having with the girlfriend or an opportunity that may be lost. So there is still there's still dramatic tension involved. Classic romantic comedies, movies have all sorts of antagonist relationship. A very good example. Oh, what was the name? How many of you ever saw the movie When Harry Met Sally? That's something of a classic romantic comedy. It's you know, they're never against each other. They're never really working against each other, but clearly there's this romantic tension between them. And yeah, it's because it's a romantic comedy, they fall in love and get married in the end. And live happily ever after. But that's, there's still that antagonism, what I'll call romantic antagonism.
Sorry, I have another question, if
Yeah.
that's possible. So with the Encounter editor, is there a way to try the story world, like to test it?
No, I took out the testing for this because the primary purpose of the testing was to test different combinations of antagonist and protagonist. However, a testing utility would still be useful here for testing the various reaction settings. And so it is my intention to put it back in at some point, but it turns out the old one, it was not easily revised to handle this issue. So I just rushed ahead and said, well, let me just go ahead and build what I need for right now with Le Mortateur. So this is a very special version of the Encounter editor. I suppose I should have used the C-boot version, but this has a few little niceties that I like, so whatever.
Is it not hard to like write the thing when you cannot test it? Like, does it not make it harder? Like,
Yes, it does, but you see, at the very outset, I did come up with a project plan. And the project plan was for me to write all of the encounters, the encounter text first. That is, right now, it's all just writing fiction, like writing a novel. That's all I'm doing. Because from past experience, I know if I can't get it all in the text, then there's no point in having all of the equations and calculations and so forth. I had to prove to myself that I really can get the whole pile of text to a point there where I am satisfied with it. I'm pretty sure this will work, but there are still some things I have to do. Once those are all done, then I will you know, move on to the next level, and I'll probably, in fact, I will certainly change the coding of the Encounter editor to do that. It's just, I'll point out, a lot of this text is really lengthy. I mean, there is an enormous amount of text in this thing. Let me have a quick look here. The encounter list right now is 1.4 megabytes. It is nothing but text. Now that does, I would guess it's only about half of that is fiction that I have written. But that's still 700 kilobytes of text. That's a big novel. I mean, and I'm nowhere near done yet. So there's, you know, I've been working on it for a bit less than a year now. And in effect, we can say, well, I have written a fairly big novel in less than a year. That's actually quite productive. But I still have a lot more work to do. So, yeah.
If I have another question kind of related to this. I remember you talking earlier about what was it? About how you didn't want your stories to have like predetermined plots in a story world.
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused. This seems like you're predetermining the plots. If you're like writing all the encounters, like you're writing all the potential scenarios.
It is, oh boy. It is predetermined up to a critical point. That is, there are two aspects of this that I still haven't decided on. The initial plan was to have so many encounters that when the player plays, it sort of skips and uses, say, every third encounter, and it's sort of randomly bouncing around, and you get to see only a portion of the background to all of this. And you go through, and then late in the story world, after you've experienced at least 100 different encounters, Mordred, your son, declares a rebellion and recruits other sub-kings in classic Arthurian terms, we would call them knights, recruits them to his cause. And then there's a big battle. And if a lot of the other people go over to Mordred, you're going to be outnumbered and you're going to lose. If few of them go over to Mordred, then you're not going to be outnumbered and you'll win. So the whole thing is, it all boils down to whether people will support you when Mordred declares a rebellion. And that in turn will depend on how you handle all of the problems. See, this is not like a game where there's, you know, one move that secures victory or anything like that. This is an important thing about stories. They build. There's a slow, steady building. Good example. Let's good, clean, simple example. The very first Star Wars movie, that is Star Wars 4, where we first meet Luke Skywalker. The crisis in that movie is when Luke is going down the trench and the ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "Luke, trust the Force." And the question is, will he trust the Force and just go with his gut and do it, or will he follow the instruments? And that decision is based on everything that happened up to that point. His first encounter with Obi-Wan, his subsequent discussions with Obi-Wan, his experiences with Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan teaching him how to use the Force, Obi-Wan dying, all of that stuff builds up to that final decision. And that's what has to happen here. I'm presenting the player with a long series of events, and each one, none of them are really obvious as to what the player should or should not do. He has to make a judgment call in every case. And those judgment calls have effects on the other people that slowly build up. And so after having gone through 100 of these experiences, everybody, all of the other characters will have their own good impression as to what Arthur whether they trust Arthur as king. And that's how they'll make their decisions, which in turn will decide whether you win or lose. This is far more subtle than a regular game. This is going to rely on intuition over and over again. I mean, it will not be possible for, for example, in most games, you go to YouTube, I forget the term for this, you go to YouTube and here's an expert playing the game saying, and now I go through the right doorway. See the little thing over on the bottom there? That's where you sneak through. And then I go through here and be careful, there'll be a monster on the left. Ready, aim, there he is, shoot him, and blah, blah, blah. They show you how to play the game and win. That will not be possible with this because, again, this is not mechanical. This is not, put the coin in the slot kind of stuff. This is based on human intuition. That's what storytelling is all about. So once again, I want to emphasize this is radically different from game design. We're tapping a completely different human cognitive capability. We are challenging a very different form of thinking. And I can guarantee you, most gamers will be not so much disappointed as irritated or irked by this, because they'll say, I don't see how to win. And they're right, there's no set of rules you can follow. Do this, do that, do this, do that, and you win. There's nothing like that in this. It's all based on your intuition about the people.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but I have like two questions about it. I'm sorry.
No, don't know.
First is so we spent all this time talking about story worlds, and my impression was that it was a set of stages and a set of actors and a set of props that just interacted with each other.
Yep.
But this makes it sound like kind of there's 100 different little story worlds, and it just plops you in each one.
Yes, the encounter approach, I mean, this is a very different technology.
So this is not the same as the story worlds we were talking about.
Yes, maybe I should actually say this explicitly. I have intimated it many times, but basically, I started off building the Storytron technology. And that was the big technology with actors and stages and props and verbs and roles and options and, all of that complexity. And what happened was I started off talking in very abstract terms, and then I sort of got sucked into delving deeper and deeper into the Storytron technology. And I really shouldn't have done that. I apologize. I realize now, basically, based on my interactions with you guys and with the Wednesday class, I've learned that that was a mistake, and that instead I should have just not even talked about the Storytron technology, and instead talked about the encounter technology, which is radically different. The only thing it really shares with the Storytron technology are, first, a personality model, which could well be the same as what we talk about with the Storytron technology. And second, the idea of options and reactions. And third, the blend operator. So that's basically, well, anyway. Oops, sorry about that.
Okay, so they're separate pieces of technology, and we're switching to talking about the encounter editor now.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Wait, and there are ideas that cross over and are worthwhile from both, but like, I gotcha. Okay. Second question. You said there's no way to like write a walkthrough that could like tell you how to win this game because it's intuition based. But I presume, given the options available to you, the options have sort of deterministic effects on how other characters view you. So
yes.
it seems to me like if somebody wanted to go in depth enough, they could tell you, well, this person will feel good if you do this. And they could go through and tell you how to get the best relationship modifiers for every character. Like it would
Yes,
defeat the purpose of the game, but it would be possible.
actually, here's the catch with that, and that is that there are the target really doesn't mean anything anymore. That is, this is for Le Mort d'Arthur only, and I'm not sure if it should apply to other encounter story worlds. But I decided that for this one, you affect the group as a whole, or you affect each individual separately. That is, everything you do, my working assumption is everything you do eventually gets out. People will eventually hear about, hey, did you hear that Arthur, blah, blah, blah. And that in turn will affect everybody's attitude towards you, but it will affect each character differently. For example, there's one story world, where is she? I don't see that. Where you're coming back after a long day and you stop at a farmstead to get a drink of water. And as it happens, the farmer and his wife have left to go do something, or they're not at the house. And only the young lady, the daughter, is there. And basically she tries to seduce you. And you can either, do the right thing and say, no, thank you. Or you can, wow, okay, sure, kiddo. That will eventually get out. People will find out. As Shakespeare said, the truth will out. And so you, different people though, the more conservative sub-kings will say, that was really unethical of Arthur. But some of the other ones will say, oh yeah, Arthur's a real stud. Different people will react differently. And now in general, there is a general drift that is there are some things that more people lean towards. It's not as if it's all balanced out, and no matter what you do, some people will like you and some people will hate you. There is a general leaning, but you will still suffer differing effects for differing behaviors with differing characters. So you need to be thinking, who's really more important to me? Do I really want Sagramore to be on my side, or Bors? Or what about Gawain? And that will also depend on how big their armies are. So again,
does it mean that every character is a witness of every event, but they all react differently, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So what confuses me, I mean, that all makes perfect sense to me. But what confuses me is that all still sounds like if I wanted to ruin the game for myself, I could Google a walkthrough and they could tell me how every action will affect every person. Like, I'm confused. Why are you saying it's impossible for this to be like boiled down to a point where someone could just tell you what to do?
well, it's not impossible. It's very difficult because
Okay,
of the complexity. So,
gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense.
So, okay.
I
Other
have
point,
another question. Like, is like you're writing a lot of of data, right? Like a lot of little stories and encounters. Is this because you felt like not having those was making the game not very pleasant to read? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it because it's more enjoyable to read good written text and not just like very like computer text? You know what I mean? Like.
Oh, well, yeah. The thing is, each of the encounters these are subtle issues. This is not a, do you hit him over the head or do you stab him in the belly? Each of these encounters is meant to present you with a sense of the characters involved, a sense of the situation. I am bringing the player into a very different world, not at all what most people expect. This really is the way Britain was during those years, and not many people appreciate what it was like. And I think it is intrinsically entertaining to go into a different world and see how it works and how the people think and feel about things. And that is, I mean, that's what good storytelling is. So a lot of this is establishing the dramatic context in which the player, as Arthur, is operating. There are plenty of cases where Arthur does things that a modern person wouldn't do. You know, he captures enemies and he makes them into slaves. That's the way it's done. He kills people. You know, just people that he might not have needed to kill, but given the context, that's what's necessary. So the idea is to bring you into this world. It's still people with feelings, with expectations and so forth. And your job as a player is to get a feel for this world and to act in a way that will encourage these people to look up to you, to respect you, admire you, and so forth. You can't ever get everybody behind you, but can you get a majority of these people to support you in a crisis? So again, I'm pushing for a great deal more subtlety than we normally experience in games. And this, by the way, is why I have abandoned so many previous attempts, such as Seaboot. In the end, I felt that Seaboot was too cold, too mechanical, it just didn't feel right to me. And this one, this is gonna feel right, or I'm not gonna publish it, period. So, let's see.
Was there something you could like lay your finger on with Seaboot? Because I was reading some of the files you sent last week, and I remember you did say it felt too mechanical, but I still don't really know what you meant by it felt.
The verb set was small. There were maybe 100 verbs, I think. And so you found yourself repeating the same cycle of actions over and over and over. It felt like, okay, here we go. I've walked into Scorticott's house. Here's Scorticott. I'll start off, hello, Scorticott, I'm nice, yes, so forth. Hey, here's some gossip about so-and-so. It felt repetitive. And you didn't really get much of a feel for the other characters. Now, I had the solution for that. About the same time I realized it was too mechanical, I realized I need to insert the encounter system. I need to build in all of these encounters, and you know, that'll require a whole new technology, and I built the encounter editor just for that. And I realized though, geez, I'm gonna need hundreds of encounters. And if I do this, it will push the ship date back by 3 years at least, because I'll be building all this new technology. I'll be writing all of this stuff. It's more than I can handle. And so I came up with this glorious idea. I can make the encounter editor available to the general public, and I can invite people to write encounters. And we'll put their encounters into the C-Boot story world. And so they get to, you know, participatory authorship, and they're learning the fundamentals of the technology at the same time. And so this meets another fundamental goal of helping, you know, introduce a new industry. So I spent 6 months from January to June writing the encounter editor, testing it, and creating videos, those 3 videos that you may have looked at. And in fact, you'll notice the first one starts off in a snowstorm in early January, and the last one ends in spring. You know, that's how spaced apart they were as I was working on them. And then in June of that year, I think it was 2017, about 3 years ago, I announced it to the world. I said, here it is, Encounter Editor. This is interactive storytelling technology that you can understand. It's not that hard. It's not like Storytron. You can do this. And I actually spent some money on Facebook, spreading the word, you know, advertising it. And somebody's mic is on. So anyway, I put it out in June. Only about, I think, 100 people downloaded it, which was a good sign. Unfortunately, only one person even asked a question about it, and nobody wrote any encounters. And that sort of broke my spirit. I realized, God, people can't even absorb this technology, and I'm going to have to do the whole thing myself. And so suddenly, you know, I'm looking at years more work on something that I'm not sure will really work. And that's when I gave up. I fought for a few more months, you know, struggling on, and then around September or October of that year, I decided this is not going to work. I am wasting my time.
Does that go back to the original problem of nobody understands and that they think games is first-person shooters and like?
Yeah, and that was also that did create one good thing I do when I reach a dead point where I realize this is wrong, not going to work, whatever. I walk away from it and I let it sit, and new ideas come to me, and it might take a year, but this happened to me 3 times before. And each time I just went off, did other stuff, and then came back at it about a year later with new ideas that took it in a you know, very different direction. This time I realized one of the fundamental problems is that nobody understands this process-oriented thinking I'm doing. So I've got to teach people, so I got to set up these courses, and like this is the 3rd version of the course. You can see I'm still learning how to teach this stuff and still making big mistakes. So yes.
So in this encounter editor, the verbs available for the player are the options, right?
Yes.
Okay, so but
They're custom to the encounter.
okay, so it's not like what we did last week, right? When we had verbs. Like no, it's more like sentences, right?
Yeah. We're not using the sentence structure of subject, verb, direct object, etc. Here, each verb is an entire action.
There's something about that confuses me, is that if the idea is like to make it feel like it's sort of a naturalistic like story world that you're like interacting back and forth with characters, are like do you only make one decision per encounter now, or do you still interact with the character?
Each encounter, you get just one decision. You'll get a few options, up to 5.
Okay. So I'm kind of confused how, and I don't mean this to be condescending, but how is this different from just like a really solid choose your own adventure?
Because of the calculations involved. In
Okay.
a choose your own adventure, your decisions only decide the vector in the directed graph. That is, a choose your own adventure is just a directed, actually it's more of a tree, and you're just bouncing your way down the tree. Whereas in this, it's still a tree in this, in that you don't cycle back. It's not a directed graph. But the decisions you make, well, they can bounce you around the tree. They can have effects on what nodes you go to, but their primary effect is to change global values, or the values of global variables, which will then much later affect decisions.
Gotcha. Okay, that's very interesting. This seems much more manageable than the Storytron did.
Yeah.
It seems like the game could get released.
Yeah, that would be nice after 25 years for me to actually release something. You think maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist?
Yes.
Well, but I mean, this is clearly superior to the Seaboot story world. You know, I had to make a lot of mistakes to finally stumble on the stumble on a good solution. What's the old line? The only way to find the right solution is to try all of the wrong solutions first, and I sure as hell did that. So
Well, it's just fascinating to me because this seems like if you had asked me how would you do interactive storytelling, I wouldn't have thought of this particularly, but I would have come to something much closer to the encounter editor than I would have to Storytron. Like this makes this, not that it's the same, but this is a lot closer to adventure game design than Storytron is.
yes,
Like
yes,
this is a lot more intuitive to a, not that it's just a video game, but it's a lot more intuitive to a person who has played video games than the other technology was. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you circled back around to something like I want to say like not iterative, but something that at least uses like a base of knowledge that people who play computer games would have. Just not like, it's not the way they're used to applying it, but like I can understand how I would play this. Like I can imagine clicking my way through these menus.
By the way, one interesting thing I'll mention about this is that the early encounters, when we're just introducing the player to the world, you really don't have any options. Basically, they are just experiences where this happens and that happens and this happens, and you have 2 choices. You can say, "Oh yeah," or you can say, "Okay." You know, that's because you can't. This was another problem I had with Seaboot. You plunged right in, and you had to make decisions on the very first turn, and you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know what the world you were in was like. And I realized we have to start off in a more expository mode where you are basically just reading and learning about the basic characters, and then we slowly increase the dramatic significance of your choices. That is, initially, your options have no dramatic significance. Basically, you're just saying, yeah, oh, I see, yeah. But then later on, we start giving you small, very small, minor choices. The idea is the dramatic significance of your choices corresponds to the amount of experience you have had in this dramatic reality. So you are still, we don't force you to make decisions before you know what the hell is going on. That was an important lesson I learned. There was one other thing I wanted to mention about this. I still have not decided whether to make this single play or multiplay. In the multiplay, we skip through encounters as we go through. We do, oh, we'll start with number 1, and then we'll do number 6, and then number 8, and then number 10, and number 18, and so forth. And then another time around, you might get a different sequence. The idea being you play through once, and you've only learned part of the story world. And then you play through a second time, and now you've learned more about it, and you get better. The other option is you go through every single one of them. And I'm still trying to make up my mind about that. So one last question, and then we need to break here. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, so I'm very interested in the Encounter editor. I think it's great, but also like I don't know, I don't see like like a huge difference between this and, for example, the Inco, I don't know if you know John Ingold. So he's a developer, and he has a studio called Inkle Studio, and he made an engine, and it kind of it looks really close to this, because it's like a choice-based game, but with kind of like personality model and stuff. Like it's different, but it's getting closer to that, I think. So maybe I think maybe that's a good thing, because it means that probably Encounter editor will work, but also no, it's getting closer to like other engines that do kind of like this stuff, I think.
I'm going to stop the sharing so that, oh, a lot of chat. Okay, Inkle Studios. I do remember looking at this once, and I will look at Inkle Studios, and
But just to be clear, I think it's a good thing, because it means that I think you will actually achieve it, and I think it makes very interesting story worlds. But just to say, if you want to read the article and stuff, I think it's talking about stuff that you are talking about too. So maybe that's going to be interesting for you.
okay, for next week, what I'm going to ask you to do, I did not show you how to do the rightmost panel where you actually play with the blend operator. However, I think you should be able to figure it out at this point. That is, most of the complexity is in the first 2 vertical panels. Let me quickly mention, though, that the reactions are specific to each option, and you can have, this is very much like the Storytron technology, and that you have weightings, only in this one they are specified. That is, instead of just writing a general equation, you get just one equation. It is a blend operator. You specify what the first trait is, what the second trait is, and you decide specifically the weighting factor between the two. So it's much narrower and simpler than than with the Storytron technology.
Before we go, so if we're writing an encounter, I assume it's mostly you write the text of you write the context, you write the options, and you write how the options affect the characters.
Yep.
So if we can't test it, what exactly do you want us to do for it? Like, why are we, like, is there a reason you want us to do that?
Well, let me just, I really should have brought up the C-boot encounter editor. Let me find it here. There. And that's this one. There's the C-boot one. Come on, baby. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do for this week. Using the C-boot Encounter Editor, which is version 1.01, I believe, I want you to play with it, especially with the testing. And then I want you to come up with a decision as to whether you think you would like, or whether you think this would be a good tool for other people to use to build story worlds. And if so, what changes you would make to the C-boot Encounter Editor. So, how should it be changed? What improvements? You've seen the Arthurian one. Damn it, yeah, I should have used the C-boot one. I keep making mistakes in the way I'm doing this. I will look at the Inkle Studios thing and send you a comment about that. Anything else? So next week we discuss what to do with the Encounter Editor, whether to give it a future, whether to take it to something new, whatever. So I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Right.